difficult time making the shower scene that Hitchcock traumatized her forever and for the rest of her life. Why, hello there, YouTube, and welcome back to 31. So, day 6, a new week, a new theme, and yes, this week it is 60s week. So, I like to dedicate, the second week at least to a decade in horror. This year, last year I did 2 decades, but this year it's just the one, it's the 1960s. So, films that came out from 1960 to 1969, or horror movies that are set within the 60s. If they're not made in the 60s, if they're set in the 60s, then they will qualify, because there is one movie that does that, goes back to the 60s and that, but we'll get round to that. But yeah, I thought I would kick off 60s week with the true classic that is Psycho. Yes, you know the story to this one. Marion Crane, she goes off with her boss's money, who she's had an affair with. She goes on the run, stops at the Bates Motel, where Norman Bates at first looks like a shy, awkward guy, but harmless nonetheless. But then, there's that iconic shower scene where Marion gets stabbed in the shower. Less than halfway into the movie, the story changes. Norman is covering for his mother, and then, Marion's sister, Leela, and Sam checking at the Bates Motel and gets quite suspicious of him, and then in a big twist reveal, Norman is only half a Norman, because he's got a dual personality with his mother, who he's also kept her body preserved and that the best he can in the house. So yeah, if I've ruined this movie for you, you've had 65 years to check this movie out. It's pretty much cemented itself into pop culture with that shower scene, and its score that you know what I'm getting at. But yeah, so that is the essential plot and what So what did I like about this film? Well, first of all, it's a classic, directed by the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock. He first read the book and then I believe he then wanted to make this a movie. But at the time when he was making this movie, no one would buy it. No studio would have it. So he invested a lot of his own money into making this movie and put a lot of his stuff on the line just to make it. And, it was a huge gamble that clearly paid off, because it became a hit. Also, Hitchcock, he specifically would not let anyone in or out after the film started. He stunned and shocked people with it, and it was a huge hit and a huge deal for its time, because no horror had actually done this film before. Also, this is actually the first movie ever to use a functioning toilet. Yeah, one of the many crazy facts about the movie. Alfred Hitchcock had a functioning toilet installed in the scene where Marion rips up a letter and flushes it down the toilet. Yeah, it's, a crazy factor, but yeah. Also, the scene where Marion Crane was stabbed in the shower, that fake blood wasn't actually blood, it was chocolate syrup. So, because back then, chocolate syrup showed up better on a black and white lens. That's another thing as well. Hitchcock, to probably save a bit of money on the budget, decided to shoot the film in black and white. He could have gone in colour, but he chose black and white. But regardless of that, I think it works in black and white as well. And it's suspenseful. A lot of it's very tame now by today's standards, because there's been a lot more worse stuff since then. But yeah, it's a classic. It's got good cinematography, some good suspense, some good storytelling. Written by Robert Bloch. Well, the book was written by Robert Bloch. I believe the screenplay for this was written by Joseph Stefano, and the Hitch directed. Also, Janet Leigh, who played Marion Crane, had such a difficult time making the shower scene that Hitchcock traumatized her forever, and for the rest of her life would never take a shower again and would only take baths. I mean, if she really had to take a shower, she would always lock the door and keep the curtain open, because he traumatized her that much with the shower. Yeah, Hitchcock kind of did put his female actresses through quite a bit during productions, but it did get the best performance, I guess, out of them. Not that he should have really bullied them into doing that, but, it was a different time in the 60s in Hollywood. And, yeah, this had a good score. This also caused a big stir by being those films where the story changes less than halfway into the picture. We don't, films had not done stuff like this before, but Psycho was among the many first. Also, probably one of the very early slashers. Of course, this was not the first psychological sort of slasher killer movie that came out in 1960. There was one that beat them to it, which we'll get to later on this week. But, yeah. This set the foundation for the slasher genre. Of course, it was still in its TV stages. It took a few more movies to get the ball rolling, such as Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then Halloween, before the 80s when it became just the common craze back then. But yeah, it has a great cast as well. I thought Janet Leigh was great in her role as Marion, with the screen time she had, where, like I say, she dies less than halfway into the movie. But of course, Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates, he has immortalized himself as a very particular horror character that everybody knows now. Who can forget that ending where Norman is alone with his thoughts and he hears his mother's voice in his head, and then how he just glares sinisterly at that camera. I feel out of everything in the movie, that is one unnerving scene. It's as if he's breaking the fourth wall and looking directly at us before fading, where we see that skull over his face, to the bit where Marion's Crane is getting pulled out of the swamp. Yeah, and for the longest time this didn't have any sequels. It wasn't until 1983 Psycho 2 came out, but where Perkins returned to his role. It was then in colour, and I think that despite how late on the sequels were, they were actually good, and I think Perkins made it all worth that while. Of course, Anthony Perkins is no longer with us. His son, though, Osgood Perkins, he's now making a name for himself in horror, given the films he's made, Longlegs and The Monkey. Yeah, so this was, like I say, it's a classic. Suspenseful, has so many interesting facts behind it and stuff. And of course, with it being a Hitchcock film, he sneaks himself a little cameo in there as well. And yeah, in fact, I would say the biographical film Hitchcock that starred Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren despite it being about Hitchcock's life, it was also about how he made Psycho as well, I believe, from that film. But at the end of that film, a bird does land on his head and flies away. Yeah, I wonder what movie that inspired next. Yeah. We'll get to that one too. But Psycho, yes, love it. And also, what can also be unnerving about it is that it was inspired by one part of a real life killer, Ed Gein. If it wasn't for the crimes of Ed Gein, we wouldn't have got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we wouldn't have got the Silence of the Lambs, and we would not have got Psycho. Because Norman Bates, Buffalo Bill, and Leatherface are all inspired by the crimes of Ed Gein. I don't need to tell you about him. I'm sure as a horror fan you know who he is. A grave robber, killed 2 women, tries to make a female bodysuit to recreate his mother's illusion and that, which is what Norman does in the movie. And of course all the other stuff, making ornaments out of human body parts and stuff, skin and bone, what have you. You know where I'm going with that. You know, very twisting and disturbing and bizarre killings and very grisly. But the fact that they were inspired by a real crime is also all the same unnerving. But Psycho, we did get that terrible remake in 1998 as well with Vince Vaughn, which is shot for shot with a few added modern things in there. More or less the same movie. We did, however, in the 2010s, get the series Bates Motel, which was started as a prequel, then a reboot of the classic, which was also good. But it all started because of this classic. So Psycho, what am I going to rate this one? You know what, it's obvious for me. I still enjoy it every time I watch. I've not grown tired of it. I'll give it 5 stabs out of 5. 5 stabs out of 5 to Psycho. So there you go. There is my review for today and our first day of 60s week. So, have you seen this one? Let me know what you think down below in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, share with your friends, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and to hit that notification bell. I've been Random Ross. This has been 31 Day 6, and I will see you tomorrow for some more 31 and more 60s week. So until then, don't have nightmares.